Never give a sucker an even break. So you want to get away with it. Okay then, if you're sure, check your conscience at the door. And brace yourself as we explore some of history's larger-than-life, fancy-talking, utterly unprincipled, crooks, heisters, con artists, tricksters, and charlatans, all of whom stand a better chance than most of us of getting away with it. But what exactly are you letting yourself in for? Good news! We're here to tell you. There's an awful lot of history in the world. Too much, really. So let's skip all the boring stuff and get straight to the interesting bits. Sit back while we bring you the surprising, funny, frightening, and sometimes downright odd true stories about what people in the past were getting up to and how to make it all work for you. This is History. The interesting bits. First things first, if you want to make a dishonest dollar, you'll have to take it from someone else. They say a fool and his money are soon parted. But what sort of fool are you looking for? There's no one easier to take to the cleaners than someone who thinks they're about to clean up. Or someone in love. Or someone who thinks there's something special. They're the ideal mark.
So a mark is the name that we give to the victim of a scam. So when someone who was gullible was identified by a fairground operator, they would put a chalk mark on the back of their jacket, therefore identifying them as someone who was scammable. Some conmen used to say the sucker is lucky enough to get together with their money in the first place, and it's our job to take that away from them. The thing to remember about scams is they have nothing to do with your IQ. Anybody can be scammed. I can be scammed walking out of this place today. It has everything to do with being at the wrong place, at the wrong time, being a little bit distracted.
Good news then. Anyone could be your mark. When you're starting out, it's best to keep it simple. And nothing puts dollar signs in people's eyes quite like real estate. What can we interest you in today? Perhaps you're after something striking with a 24-hour concierge service and elevator. How about the Eiffel Tower? Count Victor Lustig would be able to help there because he sold the Eiffel Tower twice. In 1925, Lustig was in Paris when he caught wind of rumors that the Eiffel Tower was to be demolished for scrap.
And with that snippet of information, he spun this whole web and whole story, and he got several businessmen, and the pitch was, I've got inside information that the Eiffel Tower is about to come down. You can bid for the contract to take it down. And of course, he found one mark who was willing to hand over a lot of money.
This first mark was so embarrassed that he kept quiet about the whole affair, letting Lustig pull the same stunt again with another dealer. Using 47 aliases and dozens of fake passports, the Count created a web of lies so thick that even today his true identity remains a mystery. Having already snuck out of an inescapable detention center in Manhattan, he finally washed up in Alcatraz, where he was made to walk naked to his cell to prove he had no escape tools on him. And if the Eiffel Tower seems a bit obvious, how about an exotic Eastern getaway? Can we interest you in the Taj Mahal, the perfect summer home? Great location, airy marble rooms, and an integrated water feature. Mithilesh Kumar Srivastava, known as Natwarlal, was an Indian lawyer who went rogue. Posing as a government official in the 1980s, he spent decades tricking wealthy foreigners into buying Indian landmarks, including the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, and, according to one account, India's Parliament House, along with all of its 545 sitting members. Treated as a Robin Hood character in his home village, the authorities took a dimmer view and repeatedly arrested him. But he just as repeatedly escaped. The last time this happened, he was 84 and absconded in a wheelchair. What about some familiar landmarks in the Big Apple? Conman George C. Parker found marks willing to buy the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Statue of Liberty, and Grant's tomb. But his absolute favourite piece of real estate was the Brooklyn Bridge. Parker sold that on a regular basis, telling his greedy marks they could then charge tolls to travellers on the city's busiest river crossing. And his gullible victims and their toll booths were just as regularly removed by the police. But what if your target isn't greedy? Then you could always try gently plucking their heartstrings. There's no human frailty more universal than the desire for love. So naturally, you'll want to exploit it. And during World War II, love and war created the perfect environment for a new breed of con artists, who came to be known as allotment Annies. With the war presenting the very real prospect of men never coming back, many marriages were contracted in haste. Every bride left behind received an allotment, a share of their husband's pay sent directly to them by Uncle Sam. Of course, one allotment isn't going to make you rich. Several allotments, on the other hand. For allotment Annies, bigamy was big business, marrying squads of servicemen and claiming lots of allotments. Elvira Taylor specialised in sailors, banking on the fact that husbands who took long tours of duty on vast oceans could generally be expected to keep out of each other's way. Unfortunately for Elvira, things got sticky when two US sailors bonding over warm beer in an English pub swapped photographs of their wife. Singular. Snap. Once they calmed down, they turned Elvira into the authorities. A check of Navy records showed she was also married to 4 other sailors. Snap, 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 snap. But why should you stick with a few sailors? Vanity can present you with the chance to con an entire community. Meet Princess Caribou. Disappointingly not a giant reindeer with royal pretensions, but a princess from mysterious Javasu, kidnapped and cast adrift by pirates. Or at least that was what the inhabitants of the small village of Knowle in England were led to believe when she turned up on their high street in 1817, wearing outlandish robes and a large black turban. Very few tragic princesses came to Knowle. She even made the newspapers, what with her habit of climbing trees to worship Allah Tala and her fondness for swimming naked in the local lake. Unfortunately for the princess, one avid reader, a Mrs. Neal of Devon, recognised her as the daughter of a local cobbler. She remembered how Mary Baker would entertain children by talking in a made-up language. Turns out Mary had form, having earlier been expelled from the Magdalen Hospital for Reformed Prostitutes in London for never having been a prostitute. Ever resourceful, she ended her days selling leeches to hospitals. Mary's charming con trick played on people's desire to mix with royalty. And who doesn't love to bask in a little reflected glory? She convinced gullible people into treating her like a princess, though to her credit, the only thing she ever stole from them was their dignity. So, whether it's greed, love, or vanity, spotting your mark's weakness is key. Once that's sorted, you're ready to move on to the big time. Let's take a shot at making some real money. So, you've perfected how to find your mark. But the best crooks know you have to scale things up to get really rich by conning lots of people at the same time. Have you checked your inbox lately?
So we're all familiar with the emails that offer us great opportunities, some of them originating from Nigeria, involving a Nigerian prince or a multimillionaire who, if we help, by using our bank account to house his money for a while, we'll get a cut of that money. Now, these are not new scams. In fact, very few scams you see today are brand new scams. Most scams are reversions of older scams. This is very similar to what we used to call the Spanish prisoner scam.
This con has been running since at least the 18th century, when a real letter would arrive in your real mailbox, all the way from Spain. The writer would claim that a rich man was being held in prison under a false identity.
All we need to do is find some money to bribe the guards, set him free, and when he gets to Spain, he's going to send us a fortune.
Not only that, but the man's daughter would marry you. Needless to say, if any cash was sent, the sender never heard from the Spanish prisoner or his lovely daughter again. There are plenty of modern versions. The Spanish prisoner is a numbers game. Keep spamming until you land a victim. But a more customized pitch at just the right time might just open the door to hundreds of willing victims. 200 years ago, the British Empire was at its height, and wealthy Britons were looking to cash in. So General Gregor MacGregor did just that. Welcome to the Central American holiday paradise, Poyais, TripAdvisor's third most popular destination after Narnia and Never Never Land. MacGregor had started off rather heroically, fighting alongside Simón Bolívar in Venezuela's War of Independence. Then, in 1821, he returned to London with a document proclaiming him ruler of a brand new country, Poyais, on the coast of Honduras. A bountiful land with a totally stable government you would be mad not to invest in. His timing was perfect. Britain's economy was booming, and revolutions in former Spanish colonies were opening up new markets, making Latin investments the hot new trend. MacGregor sold portions of his non-existent land to hundreds of prospective colonists, some of whom trusted him enough to travel halfway across the world to visit their little corner of paradise. Big mistake.
Because our emotions are so intrinsic to our decision-making process, powerful emotions can easily sway our choices. The feeling is the driver, not the logic.
When the British press blew the lid off MacGregor's deception, many of his victims inexplicably jumped to his defense, insisting that the general had been let down by others.
The desire to believe what you want to believe is the most powerful force in the universe. And so, for example, when we've studied, say, doomsday cults, when the doomsday predictions don't come true, people don't turn on the cult leader and, say, you've destroyed my life. They come up with excuses and reasons and explanations for why the cult leader was true all the time, because to say that the cult leader was wrong is to admit that you were wrong for believing them. And that's very, very hard for most people to do.
MacGregor retired to Venezuela in 1838. 7 years later, he died and was buried with full military honors in Caracas Cathedral, east of Poyais. Or is it west? MacGregor's problem was selling something someone might one day ask to see. But what if you just sell the promise of riches? Like this man, Charles Ponzi. It's never ideal to have a massive fraud named after you if you hope to fly under the radar. But that came later. When he first conceived of it, it was simply Ponzi's magnificent investment opportunity.
A Ponzi scam is when people are involved in some sort of investment where they believe that their returns are coming from investing, but actually their returns are coming from newer investors. So the easiest way to understand it, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Okay? All the money that goes out is purely money that's coming in from the other end from brand new investors.
The scheme was based on postal reply coupons, which allowed people in different countries to send returned postage to each other. The coupon was purchased in one country and redeemed in another for the equivalent value of that nation's stamps. But many coupons purchased in Europe were worth more in the US than their original cost. So there was a profit to be made by simply buying them abroad and then reselling them in the States. It was a surefire thing. Or so Ponzi said.
Charles Ponzi's offer looked great. If you gave him your cash, he'd give it back in 90 days with 50% interest. 50%. Soon, 20,000 people wanted to invest. Ponzi now had $10 million, about $145 million today. By the end of the scheme, 40,000 had invested. Oh, and he'd taken $20 million in fees, about $290 million today.
For almost 7 months, Ponzi's pyramid rose higher and higher.
But you can't go on doing this forever. As soon as people started asking for their money back, the pyramid collapsed. With no new investors to pay off the old ones, there was no money left. Investors lost around $500 each, and Ponzi lost 14 years of his life in jail.
Not that this put other schemers off. Many would follow in his footsteps. But probably the most infamous, outrageous, industrial-scale Ponzi fraudster was Bernie Madoff.
If you look at pictures of Bernie Madoff, he fits the part, he looks the part. He's often seen smoking an expensive cigar, he's got an expensive watch, he's got an expensive suit, he hangs out with the right people. And everyone is lulled into this false sense of security where it's almost the social proofs principle of looking and saying, well, if they've given their money to him, and if these companies have given their money to him, then surely he must be legitimate.
Ah, how wrong they were. The numbers will make your eyes water.
Madoff had pulled off a Ponzi scheme to make Ponzi proud. He'd relieved each customer of about $438,000 as opposed to Ponzi's $500. About 870 times more. He's also stolen $23 billion, as opposed to Ponzi's measly $290 million, about 80 times more. And the great American public rewarded him with another big return. He got 150 years in prison, 10 times more than Ponzi.
Bernie Madoff swindled incredibly accomplished, incredibly successful people. And he was able to find people who were predisposed to trust him for a variety of reasons, set up barriers and psychological hurdles they would have to get over so that they would trust him completely, and then take advantage of that desire to hear what he had to tell them. He did that by telling them that he was able to provide constant, risk-free returns that beat the market.
The market, the stock market to be precise, is the perfect hunting ground for swindlers even as far back as 1720, when the world was rocked by the South Sea bubble. Not actually a tropical shampoo, but a vast confidence trick, masquerading as an unbeatable investment opportunity with King George I himself as governor of the company behind it. The South Sea Company promised vast returns for investing in the trade in enslaved people, so it's difficult to have too much sympathy for those investors who lost everything when the bubble burst. Investors like this man in a wig. Sir Isaac Newton is now remembered as the genius mathematician who first described why things don't fall up. So not generally considered to be a fool. But greed can make fools of us all. He initially doubled his £7,000 investment, but lost it all when he doubled down. When asked what happened, he declared that he could calculate the motions of the heavenly stars, but not the madness of people. Or himself. Perhaps that apple hit him much harder than we've previously been led to believe. But sometimes big cons and smooth talking seem a little bit too much like hard work. So why don't you cut to the chase, dispense with all of that, and just steal what you want? It's time to talk bank robberies and cat burglary and make the move into the world of the heist. And if you're going to get into that sort of racket, you'll probably need a gang. As a rule of thumb, when it comes to putting together a criminal gang, you should look for people with proper criminal names. So you should avoid people called Gail, Dave, or Stuart, and try to home in on characters like Piano Charlie or the Human Fly. Obviously, you'll want to be gang member number 1, the brains of the outfit. Like this man, the most notorious #1 in history, Adam Worth.
Every criminal gang is assembled with the job in mind. Most rely on one front man, and that is the person who's got that charisma, who's got the master plan to bring all those pieces together at the right time.
Born into poverty, Adam Worth grew up with ambitions. Bad ambitions. And got an early start in crime as a pickpocket before progressing to bounty jumping. This neat little trick involved signing up for numerous Union Army regiments, collecting his pay, and then going AWOL. Pinkerton, the detective who would pursue Adam throughout his life, noted Worth's military disappearing act was all about avarice rather than cowardice, and that when the need arose, Worth acquitted himself bravely in battle. An experience that made Worth reject violence for the rest of his life. But Adam Worth was just getting started. What he really wanted to be was a bank robber, and not some stocking mask stick-up man, but a criminal mastermind. But a good gang needs more than just a brain. It needs specialists actually to go out there and get their hands dirty, whilst you're polishing your alibi. And no specialist is more special than a safecracker.
Don't really go off what you see in the movies. You always see them sort of filing their nails and their fingers and sort of having that touch, or the stethoscope. Nowadays, I don't think you're going to come across a safe that can be opened with a stethoscope. When it comes to things like safe cracking, it's all about knowing what the mechanics are. If you know where to place a high-powered magnet, they'll pop open.
Adam Worth was in the market for a safecracker, one whose tool of choice was more dangerous than a magnet, so Adam needed the very best in the business. The good news was he knew the best safecracker in the US, Piano Charlie Bullard. The bad news was that he was currently residing in White Plains Prison, so the first thing Worth had to steal was Charlie. Worth rented an office across the street and tunneled into Charlie's cell to break him out. Charlie proved enormously grateful, and the two sealed their partnership by robbing Boylston National Bank in Boston. Their heist netted them an impressive $4 million in modern terms. It also brought them to the attention of the legendary Pinkerton Detective Agency. So Worth and Bullard thought it wise to set sail for England, arriving there with new names and even bigger plans. Over the years, the pair would steal a fortune in diamonds, run an illegal gambling den in Paris, and free their gang from a Turkish prison, in the process establishing Worth as the criminal mastermind. But not every great safecracker had a genius like Worth to guide him. Gentle Johnny Romensky was a genius at opening safes, and like Adam Worth, never used violence in his crimes, hence the name. But Johnny was not blessed with an ability to get away with it. As such, he was very well known to the authorities, who, by 1942, realized that someone who could blow safes might be useful, what with there being a war on. Recruited into the commandos, Gentle Johnny parachuted into enemy territory to steal military secrets on behalf of His Majesty's government. It was a life of suicidal risk, but unbelievably, Johnny had a lovely war. He blew Erwin Rommel's safe in North Africa, Hermann Goering's safe in Germany, 14 embassy strongboxes in Rome, and he got away with it every time. After the war, a grateful nation awarded Romensky the Military Medal, and Johnny immediately went back to safe breaking, landing himself a 5-year stretch in jail. Working alone can have its advantages, but being part of a team means you have more skills to play with. And no self-respecting criminal gang would be complete without the third member of the team, the cat burglar. The human fly, Peter Scott, saw his work as a cat burglar as more of a religious calling than a job. Casing a grand house, he likened himself to a missionary seeing his flock for the first time, deciding these people were my life's work. Scott went on to add Elizabeth Taylor, the Shah of Iran, and possibly even Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, to his flock of burglary victims. He always dressed for the occasion in a new suit. When disturbed mid-heist, he'd often shout out, "It's only me," which, coupled with his attire, was often enough to get him off the hook. When the police finally caught him in 1952, Scott estimated that he'd committed 150 burglaries. It always helps if you can get one of your gang on the inside. In the 18th century, Barbara Erni from Liechtenstein was the undisputed queen of this trick. Erni would travel from inn to inn, looking very grand, with a huge and heavy trunk she claimed was full of valuables. Before she retired to bed, she would ask the innkeeper if he could place the trunk somewhere secure, away from thieves, perhaps where he kept the other guests' valuables. Once safely secured, her diminutive accomplice would climb out of the trunk and steal all the other valuables in the safe place.
It's sometimes known as the long pack con, the idea that you smuggle someone into somewhere secretly in order for them to steal stuff and bring it out. If you think about a secure place, a safe, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about the outside. You're worried about the outside going in. And most things are not built for keeping people in, they're built for keeping people out. And it's a fun con, it's a wonderful con.
Getting away with this once is hard enough, but repeatedly, in a place the size of Liechtenstein, that takes real commitment. Barbara Erni got away with it a lot until she was caught and became the tiny European principality's last person to be publicly executed. The fate of her tiny accomplice is not known, though it's possible they're still locked in a trunk somewhere in Liechtenstein. Assuming you've grabbed the loot, your gang will likely now depend on a fourth essential member, your getaway driver. Poised with the engine running and their foot on the pedal, ideally inconspicuous, and able to drive fast.
This is one of those roles that's been romanticized in movies. It's usually a very cool person who can drive a car like nobody else. But actually, I think the skill set is a little bit different. It's the one of expectation. Which way are we going to go? What type of traffic will be on the day? Literally forethought, rather than being able to drive a car with any particular type of skill.
A good getaway driver will plan the escape route and get you discreetly away. But no matter how brilliant your gang, there's no point in pulling off a terrific heist if you can't offload the proceeds. That's where you'll rely on the fifth member of your gang, the fence. In the mid-19th century, New York's most powerful gang boss and fence was Frederica Mandelbaum, who was mostly known as Mom. As the owner of a dry goods store, she was the front for one of the biggest criminal operations in New York, and even allegedly set up a school to teach her apprentices how to pick pockets. One of her best protégés just happened to be our friend, Adam Worth. Fencing, selling stolen goods, is where the real money is.
Most of the values that you hear when you read press cuttings of robbers made out with $50 million worth of jewels, those jewels are not worth $50 million to the people who stole them. They're worth half, and that's on a good deal, even less, because they're not going to be able to sell them at face value when going through a fence.
Thieves often end up making only a few cents on the dollar by the time the fence has taken their hefty cut. Not only was Mom's work profitable, she really did get away with it. In 1884, the Pinkerton Detective Agency infiltrated Mandelbaum's organization and uncovered her cache of stolen goods. But once released on bail, Mandelbaum promptly fled to Ontario with around $1 million, and she lived happily ever after. So, now you've assembled your gang, what's your plan for getting away with it? Well, there are some truly ingenious criminal schemes to choose from, some more successful than others.
a runabout. I'll steal it! No one will ever know!
Adam Worth reinvented himself in England as a wealthy London gentleman with yachts, racehorses and grand houses, all secretly funded by his previous crimes.
And what he really likes about British society is that it's impolite to ask about how someone accrues their wealth. He's now free in Britain to pull off these jobs, to amass this wealth for himself without having to account for his means and methods.
Worth was now welcomed at all the best places, like Messrs. Agnews, the fine art dealers. They had a new attraction in their gallery, the recently rediscovered Thomas Gainsborough portrait of Georgiana Cavendish, Duchess of Devonshire, the great-great-great-great-aunt of Diana, Princess of Wales. The painting had cost Agnews a fortune, but they'd commissioned an engraver to make copies of the picture to sell at 25 guineas each. That's just over $4,000 in modern terms, so were set to make more than their money back in pre-orders alone. But Adam Worth didn't want a copy. He wanted the original. Stealing this should have been harder than it was, but Agnews inexplicably left a window unlocked. Slipping through this open invitation with two accomplices, Worth cut the Duchess from her frame, leaving one triangle of canvas in the corner that would allow him to prove later that what he had in his possession was the real deal. Worth and the painting disappeared into the night. And before you think such heists are consigned to history, let me take you to a still unsolved art crime scene. Boston, 1990. An early morning in March. Two men dressed as police officers stroll into the Gardner Art Museum, tape up the security guards, cut canvases from their frames, and make off through the city, carrying 13 paintings worth $500 million. All done and dusted in just over an hour. More than 30 years later, the FBI still has a list of suspects, but most of them are now dead, and the artwork is yet to be recovered. So someone seems to have very much got away with it, at least for now. The Gardner heist suggests the key to criminal success might be to quit while we're ahead. Advice that Diamond Doris Payne would have done well to follow.
Diamond Doris Payne is a master jewel thief. Woman never met a diamond she did not like.
Doris's love affair with diamonds drove her to travel the world to steal gems. She just couldn't stop herself. She'd glide into a jeweler's in a fancy dress and heels, engage a clerk with one of her stories while trying on multiple items, then glide out with diamond ring in hand. In a criminal career that lasted 60 years, her last stint in prison was in 2017, Doris made off with over $2 million worth of trinkets.
She continues to commit crimes long into her elderly years, and really is able to kind of use that to her advantage. So even when she's 83, one of her last arrests was for stealing a diamond ring worth about $30,000.
Whilst Doris's plan was admirably simple, her problem was that she simply tried the same trick too many times.
Some people face a psychological compulsion to steal, right? That is, there's something about them that causes them to do this. Their actions may not even be entirely of their own volition. There are predators in the world. You don't blame a great white shark for eating you. It is its nature. It is what they do.
Try to pull stunts like Doris's too often, and you will get caught. It's just a matter of odds. That's why in 1992, Bill Brennan kept it simple and took just the one shot. Bill was used to being surrounded by money, just not his money. This unassuming and long-serving cashier at the Stardust Casino in Vegas was eminently forgettable when compared to the high rollers, mobsters, and card sharps at the casino tables. He lived a solitary life with his cat and no known close friends, working in the Stardust 5 days a week, counting the casino's huge profits. Then, one regular day in 1992, at the end of his regular shift, he put $500,000 in cash in a bag and simply walked out of the casino. While cameras were trained on the tables and guards twitched at the doors, nobody took any notice of boring Bill Brennan, the man who beat the house, never to be seen again. But before you feel too sorry for the Stardust, remember, the house always wins in the end. And for decades, the Midwestern mob had been skimming millions of dollars from the take every month. Now that is getting away with it. The problem with crime is that you often find yourself relying on associates who are literally a bunch of crooks and pursued by whole precincts of detectives. But as many a sticky-fingered government has realized, when you are the state, you can simply make your crimes, well, legal, if morally reprehensible. So if you really want to get away with it, it'll help if you're running the country. The Jewish population of 12th century England was vital to business, as in theory, lending money for interest was banned amongst Christians. Being the only bankers in town could bring great wealth, but it also brought persecution and expulsions and made you an obvious target for theft. So, King Henry II changed the law so that Jews weren't allowed to leave property in their wills to anyone except him. So, he was onto a good thing when the wealthiest man in England, the Jewish banker Aaron of Lincoln, died. Henry quickly had Aaron's estate seized and demanded the fortune be sent across the Channel to fund his floundering war against the French king. Out at sea, a great storm blew up, and somewhere between Shoreham and Dieppe, Aaron's fortune disappeared beneath the waves, where it still lies, depriving Henry of one of history's most lucrative hauls. But art can prove particularly tricky to offload. Every mastermind should expect the unexpected. Even our anti-hero Adam Worth wasn't immune from that. Worth had intended to use the painting of the Duchess as leverage to force the authorities to release his brother from prison. But when his brother's lawyer got him released on a technicality, Adam was left with an expensive painting that he couldn't sell. Strangely, for a robber, Worth wasn't interested in Agnew's reward of £1,000. Instead, he became obsessed with the Duchess and took to carrying her everywhere with him in the false bottom of an airtight trunk. It seems his real problem wasn't how to steal things, but how to let go of them when he had. With gang members threatening to tip off the police, Worth needed a way out. So you've mastered the art of the con, got a gang together and pulled off some big heists. But now comes the hard bit. How do you escape without losing your life? Or someone turning you in? There's always the Robin Hood strategy. Appeal to the masses. American gangster John Dillinger turned to crime at just the right time. With the Great Depression in full swing, Middle America was furious at the banks and businessmen who they felt had stolen their jobs, their savings, and their homes. They cheered Dillinger on during his bank-robbing spree and helped him stay one step ahead of the law. Having lifted $300,000, he remained so confident of the people's love that he actively courted publicity, visiting amusement parks, nightclubs, and baseball games. Sadly, fame proved no protection, and following a tip-off, the FBI shot Dillinger dead outside a movie theater. The crowd went wild. Women dipped their skirts in his blood, and 15,000 people lined up to see their hero's body in the Chicago morgue. He may have enjoyed fame even after death, but no one could claim that he got away with it. This is D.B. Cooper. Well, it almost certainly isn't, but it is the chap who in 1971 bought a one-way ticket to Seattle claiming to be D.B. Cooper. Shortly after takeoff, he politely informed the flight attendant that he'd like a glass of bourbon and that he was carrying a bomb and would like $200,000, 4 parachutes, and to refuel the aircraft upon arrival. FBI agents gathered the ransom money. At Seattle-Tacoma Airport, the authorities delivered up a cash-filled knapsack and parachutes, and Cooper delivered up the passengers. Refueled and back in the air, and with the pilot ordered to cruise at 10,000 feet, D.B. Cooper then bailed out of the aircraft with the ransom money strapped to his chest. He was never seen again, suggesting either he made a daring getaway or an alarmingly high-velocity impact. If he did survive, he's since lived a complex and brilliant lie. But that's not as easy as it looks.
For most of us, lying is quite difficult. I don't mean those, the polite lies. He or she can't come to the phone. I can't come to this party because I have other plans. But like actually constructing a complicated story involves a high level of what we call cognitive load. People who are psychopaths, who are professional con men, have so internalized the lie that they are going to tell that the cognitive load is easy for them to manage. The research suggests that the smarter you are, the better you are at lying.
But even if you do get caught, there's no need to despair just yet. If you have something to trade, then perhaps you can cut a deal. And that brings us back to our old friend Adam Worth. Worth's refusal to cash in the Painted Duchess had not gone down well with his gang, who'd rather disloyally started tipping off Scotland Yard and the Pinkertons as to his whereabouts and plans. In a tight corner, Worth finally decided to return the lady. After negotiations over a substantial finder's fee with Worth, art dealer Morland Agnew arrived at the Auditorium Hotel in Chicago. Agnew was waiting in the hotel lobby, as no doubt were members of the law enforcement community, including Pinkerton himself. An unusually elderly messenger arrived and handed over a brown paper parcel. Within moments, Worth had gone. Inside was the Duchess, with the missing corner that proved beyond doubt that it was the original. Within days, Agnews had sold the painting for $150,000, around $4.7 million today. After giving up the Duchess, Worth took to drinking. Amid failing health, he used nearly all of his money to bring his children over to England. After stealing millions of dollars in his lifetime, by his death in 1902, Worth was virtually penniless. He was buried in an unmarked grave.
Most con men will do one type of scam throughout their life, whether it's check fraud, whether it's robbing banks, whether it's pickpocketing. Adam Worth did a bit of everything, and that requires a particular type of skill in order to make sure that you get away with it.
So spectacular a criminal mastermind was Adam Worth that Scotland Yard dubbed him the Napoleon of crime. A title Sir Arthur Conan Doyle would borrow and give to Sherlock Holmes's arch nemesis, Professor Moriarty, securing Worth a permanent place in the annals of crime. So what have we learnt? First, don't steal things you don't want to sell or can't sell. You've probably missed the whole point of robbery if you do that. Second, remember that every accomplice brings a new skill, but also new and surprising ways of getting you caught. Never buy a fictional timeshare. And finally, remember that almost no one gets away with it forever, except lawyers, who will hugely profit from your crimes, whether they're chasing you or defending you. So if you definitely want to get away with it, go to law school.